Okay, cool. The recording is now in progress. So before we get started, we just want to take a moment to ground into this space with the land acknowledgement. So I'm going to go ahead and read this off. We acknowledge that as an international network, we are currently standing on ancestral lands of many indigenous nations. Through this acknowledgement, we also honor the millions of enslaved Africans who physically and spiritually tended to these lands. And I'm just going to leave a pause for deep breaths and processing of that. So we're going to introduce the coordination team now. There are coordinators that couldn't be here at today's event, but have put a lot of work in seeing this series of events come to life. The first is Victoria Barnett. Their pronouns are she and her. They are Network's node and working group manager. They also handle a lot of operational things within the network. So we just want to take time to shout them out. The next is Noor Arafat. Their pronouns are she and her. They are a steering committee member and they are active node coordinator for the Chicago node. Next up is myself. My name is Taylor Simone. My pronouns are she and her. I am DJN Special Projects Manager. And Wes, you can jump on if you'd like.
I'm Wes Taylor. I'm part of the steering committee and DJN founder, and my pronouns are he, him.
Okay. And last up is Renee Joy. Their pronouns are she and her, and they are a communication specialist, an amazing storyteller who is helping out with chat support today. So you'll see them sending messages and interacting in that way. So as a network, we align with the Allied Media Conference's community guidelines. And for today's session, we just elevated a few of those. There is a link to the full amount of community guidelines if you ever want to check them out. So the first is just to take care of yourself. This is a 2-hour meeting. If you need to take a break at some point, please do so. Ask questions before assuming. The best way to understand the choices, actions, or intentions of one another is by asking. So if you need clarity or follow up, we encourage you to reach out in the chat. There'll be times we can come on via audio. So if that space is open as well. When offering critical feedback, do so with the belief that people can change. When receiving critical feedback, listen to others with a willingness to change. This is something that we hold true as coordinators, and just invite you to share that energy of generosity. So the annual theme weaving series. This has been a series of events that we see as aligning members, coordinators, contractors, and steering committee members with shared commitments, guiding thoughts, and priorities that will inform network growth in the following year. So why we are doing this? We want to allow members to continue to shape the network in directions that we move in, to support nodes and working groups with potential programming ideas, and to find that inspiration for ourselves as contractors and steering committees. And also to create space to look back on throughout the year that may inform decisions such as resources and the ways they flow throughout the network. At our kickoff event that happened in the spring, we saw this as a time to listen, observe, and find threads within the network. And we did this by offering 3 prompts. So what is the moment we are living in? What do we have the power to shift? And what can we grow together from our gathering? And in today's meeting, we have these following expectations. We have already patterned all of the amazing feedback that we got from that kickoff event. And today we will be upvoting and finding the top 6 threads within those observations that will help us move closer to an annual theme. We'll discuss what it is what is resonating with us and why. We'll also brainstorm and select a theme, a singular theme based on those top 6 threads. And there will be room for discussion after that to see how we feel about the theme being activated and to also share resources with y'all that we've been developing to help activate the theme. So next, Wes is going to share just a little bit about the synthesis process.
So yeah, so within synthesizing the information and going from collecting to creating a theme, we transferred a lot of this information to a mural and into a Google Doc. We categorized the threads for 3 different prompts. So these are the 6 categories that we identified from all of that information that we've been gathering. So pandemic grief, renewal, and resurgent was a major theme. What are we experiencing? What are we examining and exploring? Resources and programming, mindset, embodiment, and community, network growth, member support, and larger discussions. So within the moving past all of that, Renee Joy, our communication specialist, paired these threads with observations of thread language in the network. So creating a commitment framework using place, practice, story, organizing, care, play, and change. And we'll share more about this in the upcoming theme announcement event after we figure out what the actual theme is and we thread it together. And these will be tied into how we can actually activate the theme. So, oh, sorry.
No, it's all good. So we're going to get started with voting and synthesizing, giving you the opportunity to really look at the threads that were shared during that kickoff event and how we organize them. We created a process chart that shows how we'll be collectively moving towards a singular theme within the Miro board. I'm going to screen share that Miro board now. If you haven't opened the Miro board, please do now, and a link will be shared in the chat.
And I want to add, just as we're going through this process, and since there are fewer people than we were thinking about how this would happen, we're going to go through the process. It may not, hopefully, actually, because it is not so many of us, it won't take that long. But we're going to go through the process as if there were 20 to 25 people in the room. But I think going through this exercise, we will figure out how the theme can present itself and see how we can do this with the people here. So also saying that even if you're new to it, then full participation, and this is definitely a participatory session for us to get to where we need to go.
Yes, that's great context. So when you get to the Miro board, there are a couple things you'll see. On the far left, there's an agenda that includes all of the links that will be shared out throughout today's meeting. There are also all of the slides here. So if you want to stay in here and follow along, feel free to. On the furthest right, you'll see the actual threading or weaving board that we'll be moving through with the voting process. And these post-it notes in between are the simple process chart that we put together that will help explain how we're going to be moving through this final board. So we're going to be moving from top to bottom. In part 1, there'll be 3 5-minute voting rounds. Each person will select 3 threads from each prompt that will move us towards our top 6. And to further break this down, there are post-its below that. So you'll see prompt number 1 will have 5 minutes, was the moment we are living in. Everybody will select the 3 threads that really resonate with them. Prompt 2 and prompt 3. And that's how that will follow that. There is a note here about accidental votes. There's a chance that you may accidentally select a thread and want to change your vote. All you have to do is hover your mouse over the selection. There will be little arrows next to the post-its, and a minus sign should appear. You can click that minus sign and it will take away that vote and give you another vote. So if you have questions about that, if that happens and it's still confusing, just shout out over audio or hit us up in the chat. After we move to that voting round, we'll be in this blue middle section where we'll be posting the top 6 results, 2 from each of the prompts. And then in the final section, we'll be doing theme weaving voting, where everybody will add one idea for a theme, and then we'll vote on a theme together. Each participant will get 3 votes for this round too. So I'm just gonna position so you can see where we're starting with prompt 1. And prompt 1 is, what moment are we living in? If you're looking at the screen, you'll see the section that I'm highlighting for voting right now. Again, you'll have 5 minutes to look through this and vote. Please take as much time as you need within that space to actually start casting votes. I'm gonna put 5 minutes on the clock. Select that we can vote on shapes, and that time has started. If you're having trouble accessing, please let us know in the chat. You should see this screen pop up that says voting session has started. Go ahead and select join voting, and you'll see you should have these options to select plus signs on each of these shapes. So we're gonna start that right now. Renee has shared a CarePod playlist. If you want to put that on through this time to just relax and reflect, please go ahead.
What we have, as you know, as we voted and went through the first column, in the column question, the question was, what was a moment, or what is the moment we're living in? And what we have, our top 3 are recultivation of in-person communities, listening to how the groundwork has been laid by our ancestors, making new forms of activism possible, hearing what couldn't be heard before, levels of burnout and despair around systems of power, accommodating ongoing levels of crisis and violence, loss of the moment of disruption. Okay, so sorry. So levels of burnout and despair around the systems of power, accommodating ongoing levels of crisis and violence, and simultaneously, I think semicolon, loss of the moment of disruption. And so I just want to speak that through because it's like hard for me to understand that one if I don't talk that through and see if we can actually people agree with like how this is being interpreted. And once again, these are comments that came from previous conversations that people deposited. And this was one that kind of slipped through as we were evaluating this, but it seems like this loss of a moment of disruption as being coming out of a time of a lot of change, we're losing that moment to continue to enact change that was so, I don't even like the word disruption, but this moment that was so disruptive of the past 3 or 4 years that we're still kind of in, and the feeling of not being able to harness that moment anymore, or that moment fleeting. Which I don't know. That's my interpretation of that full thing. I don't know if anybody else feel when they were reading that, that's how they interpreted that when they chose that. Any other thoughts on that one? Or for the people that picked it, or was there another interpretation when they chose that one?
Wes, I would say I agree with you're thinking there. That's how I was kind of thinking about it. Like, especially coming out of the summer of 2020, just so many more people being activated, and then that energy kind of feeling like it's not there. Like I see it in my interpersonal relationships, in my, in my community. It's just, yeah, it feels like the moment has passed.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Anybody else for? I just want to get clear because like if we settle on that, and I had to like think it through, so I just want to get confirmation on
Sure, yeah.
how we move that one forward. Which I think there's a lot in that one too. So I'm also just acknowledging that it's pretty dense statement.
Yeah. I have something to add.
Yeah.
Like when hearing that, I feel like I just think about, well, the pandemic in specific, which was hard for a lot of reasons, but it's like there was a rev up of obligation, I think, as things really started to like go back to this in person, kind of like go back to the norm, if that makes sense. And that I feel like there's a silent overwhelm with that, where it's just like the realization that actually people were always functioning at like this boundary of what they can hold and the capacity to like push through things. And like, yeah, going back, like in some ways I felt, at least for me, the pandemic kind of highlighted that. So when things did start to rev back up, I felt the burn, and in some ways I still feel the burn and need for adjustment. And yeah, it does feel like the capacity is just not there, like in a practical sense, but also in an interpersonal sense to move on some things that were there.
Yeah.
I don't know if
So,
you get
yeah. I mean, all of that, and I'm not trying to single that one out. I think the other one's a little more self explanatory, but I think they're all really good, really powerful things, thinking about the moment. And then I guess the other thing in thinking about the moment is hard to not talk about this moment without attaching it to a previously more intense moment, which there's still a lot of carryover from that. If we were to create some delineation between moments, and some people might argue there is no delineation yet. Um, just moving on to like the next category.
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Wes. I was just going to
Yeah.
share from the chat that Nuri was affirming as well that it sounded that way to her too.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, and thanks for thanks for affirming that the read of it. So the next section we have is, what do we have the power to shift? And in this one we have a single thing that one votes, and we have the ability or have the power to shift aspirational and practical, I would say, things. We need to be both imaginative and make the new worlds that we need at the same time. So one thing that I would be curious about this, and this is like side commentary, we don't have to harp on this, is like, yes, like I totally agree of being, imaginative and working towards that vision in ways that coincide and are in lockstep with each other, or move each other forward. But yeah, I'm curious as to like one more level or two more levels of specificity around that. But that's side commentary. Does anybody else have like any thoughts around this? The highest vote getter of being aspirational and practical at the same time. And if not, we can move on. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, we're just getting like the commentary at the same time. So moving on to the last column. What can we grow together and from our gathering? And I think together as a network, together as people that are aligned with our network, people that are aligned that are not designers, but thinking about like, justice, abolition, all the things that are necessary for our communities to shift that don't associate with this network or some of the things that we talk about. But I think there's a togetherness of that. And thinking about our gathering now, and future gatherings as a prolonged moment within the network, and we're thinking about how to activate a theme and activate the resources that the design network has in our gathering internally, with people that are established within the network and with people that are new and then come in, and then gathering with, I would say, when we talk about alignment, gathering with other aligned like groups and organizations that exist now and then potentially, will emerge. So from those, the top vote getters are working with imagination as a multiplier. I'm curious to see what people's thoughts were around that, or people's meanings or interpretation around that. Sharing of examples of embodied practice of the principles. And this work is changing. There's no right way. We can continue cultivating and growing these conversations. And so, yeah, in gathering, growing conversations and cultivating as we learn, is how I interpret there not being a right way or not being established pathways yet, and we're trying to create those pathways. Any thoughts or commentary on this last, what we have, what can we grow together?
And I'll just lift up again that if folks want to share in the chat,
For sure.
I'll read it out loud. That's no problem. So if folks just need a few minutes like a minute to type something up, feel free, but I'm ready to read it out loud.
So, okay. I mean, if we feel like things are relatively self-explanatory, that's cool, or without need, go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah, something that I'm just curious about is just like the embodied practice. When I think of embodiment and practice, I almost think of like a practice of mindfulness. And like from my time in the network, there have been calls for like examples of how the principles can be used, but there's something very different about like how can the principles be embodied versus how can the principles be applied.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just something I just want to call out as something I'm curious of, and like curious if anybody has any kind of like thoughts on like their own experience with embodying the principles. But that may be something we can put a pin in for now and move on. But yeah.
I mean, that's deep, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, for sure. Like, I don't even know if I've ever made that distinction or that thought, or like how to do that. Yeah. So yeah, I'll like, keep that lingering too, as a way to move forward. So am I kind of in charge of thinking about like moving us into the next section?
No, I can take over from
Okay.
here. I just need
Thanks.
a second to share my screen. Okay, just make sure we're in the right place. So the next part of this connecting thread section is just giving time for people to weave a theme. So what we want to invite each participant to do is come up with one idea for a theme and add it to one of the post-it notes in the bottom of that mirror board section. We'll be using our top 7 to weave a singular theme. And we're combining this time with a break to give everyone time to really think this through. If you're feeling stuck, pick descriptive words from each of the 3 prompts and start combining them, playing with them to see what comes about. I'm gonna show an example on the next slide, but feel free to start your break and check the agenda. There is a written example in there that's pretty easy to follow through. And we'll meet back at 1:05 to vote. In all transparency, because I mean, of the nature of our network being one that centers around equity and process, chances are that in some ways this will be opened up again to just capture more voices of coordinators. Like, we understand that coordinators play such a vital role in seeing this work through, and will play a vital role in actually activating the theme. So it's of the utmost importance that we get as much voices in on this as we can. But still, we want to move forward with this exercise of weaving a theme. So again, we'll be back at 1:05. If you want to start your break now, please go ahead.
Can I just add really quick as we go into the break?
Yes.
One, thanks for putting all that into perspective. And Serena and Nori, thank y'all for being here at this point. And I think this exercise, just to impart on why this exercise is really important to us as an exercise and process, because this has like very real implications. And not to put too much weight on it, because I think we are going to still figure out how to gather more voices, but this leads directly into how we are going to allocate resources, how we're going to spend our time together for the next year or two, and how we are actually going to activate the network as calls to action, as ways to gather, and a way to distribute like monetary, personnel, resources, and figuring out how and where we may even gather in person and around what topics and ideas. And so like this exercise is really, it's really important to us. And I bring that up because the next steps to this process, hopefully this is not a one-off for you guys, and hopefully we can make this accessible for you as participants, because the next step is going to be about reallocating like monetary resources for things that you might think are important in a hyper local way, or from the networks that you're working through within the larger umbrella of Design Justice Network. So I don't know, does that make sense as we move into our break, and not to create too much pressure on you guys, but just to say how important it is for you guys to stick with us and how we go through this exercise?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say thanks for the context. I was wondering if you were thinking about trying to find ways to bring more perspectives and voices in after today. So that's also good to know that today won't just be, a one and done kind of session, and there will be more opportunities for other people to chime in.
Yeah, and Nora, you have a question mark as to like, and I know you're brand new, so I feel like this is like bringing you like into like, yeah. So I would just say, just as process and thinking about like in your case, thinking about embracing uncertainty as a way to even move through this, and even if you do have question marks, it's fine for you to like, kind of walk through the darkness with us, and we won't take this to a bad place, and your presence is greatly appreciated. So yeah, let's take this break and then come back.
Yes, okay, that sounds good. And here's just a quick example before that happens. So this just shows that for each prompt, I took descriptive words from each. So renewal, regeneration, reimagining for prompt 1, honoring our full selves to experiment and grow, expanding choices, connectedness, and shared reality. Those are not the full prompts. I broke them up and started highlighting the descriptive words that felt good. And this is the theme that I created from that. So renewal, regeneration, reimagining a shared reality, a year of connection and community. And that's kind of long, but it doesn't matter. I think this is really about capturing the essence of what we're observing or wanting to move towards right now. So, yeah, we will see y'all back at 1:05.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We are officially on break. Okay. So I am sharing the board right now. And over break, we had a short little chat conversation as facilitators and decided that we think instead of moving through another round of voting to get to the theme, since we've already shared that that process will most likely be opened up for more voices to come in, that it would be best to spend this time doing a roundtable. Us as coordinators, we've added to themes as well to just help like round that discussion out. But we will move from person to person. I can start us off. And each person, if you want to read your theme that you have proposed, that would be helpful. You don't necessarily have to. If you want to share in the chat and have that read out loud, that is also fine. And you can just indicate that in the chat, like, hey, I'll be sharing in the chat so we know to give you a little bit of time to type something up. So yeah, I'll start us off. My theme that I added was imaginative creation and embodied recultivation of community. When I was creating this, I pulled from that space of like practicality and aspirationality, aspirational thinking. And I really love the note of like imagination as a multiplier. I don't fully understand what that means, but I feel like it's so expansive in its presentation. I also couldn't let go of that thread of embodiment and what that would look like to move from a place of embodiment versus like application. And yeah, just like acknowledging with the recultivation of community that whether the difficult time can be segmented or the difficult time is still happening, there is a resurgence and a need to identify like points of grief within the network and really understanding like how we'll move forward from that and what community can look like in the aftermath. So I try to be expansive and gracious within this like theme as well. And that's pretty much what I was thinking. Um, would anybody like to jump in next?
I'm happy to go next. Mine's the first one on the top left, centering, honoring the groundwork, embodying the principles, and imagining new futures. I was kind of thinking of like the somatics practice of centering and with like the different dimensions, and the questions I think made me think about that. Like, where are we at? And I think the one that stood out to me from there is I forget exactly how it was framed, but like learning from our ancestors, like understanding the work of the past. And I think that's something I'm feeling particularly called to. Like sometimes I feel like I like trick myself into thinking everything needs to be built from scratch, and I forget that there's, so much to build on. But I feel like I'm only at the precipice of understanding and kind of grasping all of what it is. So being able to kind of honor the groundwork that's already been laid and build onto that feels important to me. And Taylor, I also was continuing with that thread of embodiment. And Wes, I'm thinking about the first conversation we had and how so many people, I think, I imagine, come to the network like looking for those application examples. And I really like this idea of like emphasizing embodied practice and that comment that you made earlier, Taylor. And then yeah, similarly kind of playing with always imagining what can come, what we can create together into the future.
Okay, that's awesome. I feel like you hit on such like sound threads that really like span all of the threads that we've seen or kind of like tie into most of them. So thank you for sharing that. And like the context makes complete sense. Like that note on centering really hit me. Would somebody like to go next? Volunteer to go next.
I can go next. So, yeah, I'll just read it. So, imagination is the multiplier. The moment is not lost. The ancestors laid the path. A year of practicing new forms of activism, amplification, and gathering. So it's a paragraph, and I was more concerned with getting the sentiment down than editing at this moment, thinking about like with a conversation about a statement like this. But yeah, and I was just thinking about like just trying to capture the things that resonated the most with me from the things that we voted on. And just seeing if I could make something like cohesive. So like, I think that, it's the statement is two things. One is just like three different kind of affirmations that don't, they're just three statements. And then I feel like those three statements can be glued together by the second part, by the the embodiment of practicing new forms, which I think new forms implies imagination to get new forms of anything. But then thinking about like amplification as like going back to where the statement was of hearing of what couldn't be heard, and thinking about that as being really important. And then thinking about new forms of activism and gathering, but all of these things. But I'm also thinking like going back to the word amplification, where hearing what couldn't be heard, but also if you're practicing new forms of activism and thinking about amplification, that could also mean a speaker, and party and music and things like that. And so just thinking about like all the implications of amplification, and as we practice new forms, being anchored by this idea of like the ancestors already laying a path, and going back to what Serena was talking about, like not reinventing. And then going back to like how I interpret like imagination being a multiplier. And I think imagination, the way I interpret it in reading it and thinking about what it was in kind of proximity to when the other statements of like capitalism being the multiplier, and like this idea of like um untethered growth, and thinking about that not being realistic, but imagination can create unrealistic growth, and not be a strain on resources or be like 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 an unreal I don't know, expectation or whatever. So yeah, that was my statement.
Okay, thank you. Like hearing that like interpretation of imagination as a multiplier, it's so grounding. It makes so much sense and has me excited to just explore that regardless of if it's like in the final theme or not. So yeah, thank you. And we have two more left. Would anybody like to go? And I'm checking the chat just in case.
Yeah, Nuri just shared in the chat that she apologizes for hers being crazy long. Do not apologize for that. Recultivation. Yeah, I heard that. Nuri trying to connect all the things. So I'll read out recultivation, listening to the old to plant seeds of the new. Examples of embodied practice may be contemporary, ancient, or anything in between. The past shows us what is possible and connects the aspirational to the practical. That was really delightful to read out loud.
Mary, I know you're new, but look, welcome. Like, cause that really hit, like just having that like context of how the past really moves us forward and grounding into that really felt magical, like in this explanation. So yes, thank you. And last but not least, Renee.
Yeah, that's me. And that really, like what Nuri shared, really, what everyone has shared, I think sounds really resonant to me when I think of what I meant when I'm just writing these, really quick little phrases down, which is learning through lineage and acting on imagination. So to me, I mean, gosh, Neri, again, you really framed it beautifully with how you said that examples of embodied practice can be found like in the contemporary, in the ancient. It's not just what's happening now, it's what's happened before. And in seeing it in the past, we create a connection between ourselves and that moment. And when we then imagine what's possible next, it creates a new, like it's a new node in that lineage. So for me, that's really, the connecting points that I wanted to bring forward with language. I don't know, this feels a little too like everybody else has really found some shape that I think this is maybe as a just a few words come together, it doesn't quite capture. But it was really me wanting to think about how staying grounded doesn't mean being fixed in place. It's just moving with confidence wherever you're moving, in whatever plane or whatever material conditions. And I have learned more and more through justice oriented work, especially when it comes to design as a practice, the importance of understanding the lineage of a moment that I'm in. Even if the moment I'm in is only possible here and now, there are moments that came before that I need to know about. And then to me that really connects it again with one of my favorite phrases or like the principles. I think it's number 10 that says like what worked before. Yeah, that was really what came forward for me when I was looking at these connecting points and thinking of how to bring them together.
Okay, that's beautiful. And what stuck out to me from like you sharing the context is just like this idea that a theme can be similar to a mantra or affirmation, and the ways that it gives us hope, and the ways that it reminds us that like we're not alone in this work. We are in community, we are in direct lineage. So yeah, first I want to thank everybody for just like going with the flow. This felt like a really rich share, and I feel really full like moving out of this space. And I also think that like having this as something that can be shared out to other coordinators will really help to give context and start to think like imaginatively, like this is a multiplier of imagination in itself. So next we are going to, and I'm just gonna get these slides together really quickly. We are going to start winding down and wrapping up. And there are a few resources that we just want to share. So the first is a coordinator portal. This is something that we have been working on for the last couple of weeks. That will be a password protected space on our main website for coordinators to really access anything theme weaving related and have a space to land. So this will launch September 6th. Announcement will be sent out with the password via email. What's included in the portal is the launch of the new node and working group guide. Victoria Barnett has been working really hard to see this through and went through their own process of visioning and member feedback. So it's really exciting for that to be like in a space where it's ready to share. A network facilitation resource guide with different ways of reaching consensus and organizing in-network and out-of-network resources. We created an extensive list of resources that tie back to the threads that may not have been captured, but should definitely be explored. And then all the videos of weaving events, along with downloads such as like the mural boards and things like that. So you can always have those as a point of reference. We would like to extend an invitation to the final event in the series, which will be to create, not to create, to call out the theme announcement and to celebrate it. We'll be sharing ways of activating the theme. We mentioned the commitment framework earlier, and this is going to be the space where we really share that and start to envision the ways that the theme can be activated. We'll also be sharing funding opportunities for nodes and working groups. Please share this with others so they know that it's coming and they can be prepared to like process that information about funding.
And just to talk about funding too, it's not a generic list of funding that's out there. These are direct resources from DJN that we are putting back into the network. So these are funds that we have that we're putting out there, not necessarily connecting you to random other places and as far as funding and resources go.
Yes, important clarity. Thank you for that. Yeah, the grants have opened up a lot for us. So we're excited to share that back with y'all and get that into y'all hands. So those are some of the resources. We do want to close out by just sharing other things that are happening in the network. So this last winter, the CarePod launched as an entity within the network and has held a series of visioning events over the spring and summer. The last event was called Reflecting Back Our Longings and Intuitions, and that was held July 31st. Alongside a synthesis share, Sarid Jarrell Johnson of Temperance Clear Tarot joined as a guest practitioner. Something that is also coming out of the development of the CarePod are funding opportunities for nodes and working groups to use towards planting seeds of care within their spaces. People are eligible, or node and working groups are eligible if one coordinator attends a care circle or practice space with the CarePod team beginning this fall. They will be sending out information about upcoming programming. If you weren't able to make one of those sessions in the summer, you can indicate on the application that you will be planning to attend an event in the fall, or one of the coordinators in your team will. These grants are meant to nourish care within the node and working groups. And this is kind of the ways that the CarePod team envisions those honorariums being used. So hiring a somatic facilitator to teach a particular somatic practice to folks in your local node or working group. This can be for your internal team or an event open to the public. Creating a community dinner to cook and connect with each other in a deeper way. Hiring a local herbalist to teach a class about crafting teas to meet the needs of the groups. And these are just some examples that they put forth. It is up to you to decide what care looks like in your space and how you want to use those funds. The CarePod also has arena channels. So the current channels include Design Justice Care, Healing Justice Reading Room that has a bunch of amazing resources already linked. The CarePod Collective Lineages. So we talked about lineages a lot during this session, and that's something that the CarePod has really been centering around as far as thinking about healing justice and those things. So there's more information in that channel. And the last are tools and offerings from our gathering, care circles, and practice spaces. So I mentioned that they had a somatic practitioner in this last session, and they've had amazing guests throughout. So please check that out to see any content that came from that. The last thing we want to announce is the Digital Community Restructuring Project. This is a contract-led initiative with the goals to give members more mobility and tools for engaging their digital community, to create more automatic processes for contractors, including the addition of a new member system to support member forum engagement and activation, to strengthen benefits for members, and to allow members to better shape their digital community. So outcomes from this process will include ways of gathering events that help us gather member feedback on engagement, needs, and desires within the digital spaces that we navigate, a digital community guide with engagement tools and new community guidelines, And a new member system through Mighty Network specifically, we will have usability tests to test out features and make sure that everything is easy to navigate, but that is the system that we've decided to move forward with. So those are just other exciting things that are happening in the network. We will be sending an email follow-up to people within the next week about this event specifically. Thank you so much for joining.